Aloha! Welcome to the Debrief from Hawaii News Now, where we break down the biggest issues facing the islands. I'm your host, Emily Cristobal, and in today's episode, we are joined by Republican State Representative Gene Ward. He's someone you're probably familiar with. He was first elected to the State House in 1990, where he served till 1998. And then he's been serving continuously since 2006. Rep. Ward, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. And what happened to that 8 years between 1998 and 2006? It was Peace Corps in East Timor, as well as a presidential appointment at USAID in Washington, D.C. Just so people don't know, I'm serving long, but I haven't served 30 years like some others.
Totally. Thank you so much for clearing that up. And I wanted to get right into it. So Hawaii has long been a blue state. We've got a Democratic governor, and Republicans are outnumbered 45-6 in the State House and 23-2 in the Senate. What do you see as your role as a member of the political minority?
It's very clear. We are number one, we're the loyal opposition. If you didn't have the loyal opposition, all you'd have is yes men, yes women, etc. And secondly, we don't have the votes, but we have the voice. We are the ones who've got the guts, if you will, to speak out against what otherwise is the trend for those on the majority party. If you speak out, you could lose your office space, you could lose your position as a chair or a vice chair. And we are the ones who call balls and strikes, which in a way is a freeing thing to be able to speak because, look, the legislature, to me, is the marketplace of ideas. That's where people's ideas either rise or they fall. And not to be able to speak freely is really difficult. So I kind of think it's an advantage to be in the minority. But obviously, it's an advantage to be in the majority. But that's something that's coming down in the future. Not here now, but it's coming. Remember, 100 years ago, the Republicans owned and ran everything. Now, 100 years later, the Democrats own and run everything. That is not the best formula for an effective democracy. And I think people realize that, but look, it's a trend since 1959. We haven't changed it yet, but eventually it'll change. And my friends in Arkansas and Georgia, they say, look, it took us 130 years to change it. Ward, don't give up. It'll come out. The great thing is that democracy is self-correcting. It swings, but then it self-corrects. It swings and self-corrects. And I'm hopeful that eventually it will be. But right now we're the small minority, but we're the vocal minority in the state legislature.
Totally. And I was kind of wondering if you could describe how exactly you navigate in this, you're such a small minority, but how do you go about, pushing through your policies?
How do you go about navigating? Well, we walk like everybody else, chew gum at the same time. Case in point, during COVID, there was a pay raise due to the state legislature. Not the pay raise that right now the city council is going through, but it was as controversial. In the rules of the House and on the floor, we are able to introduce amendments to otherwise deny or postpone the pay raise, of which I introduced an amendment to postpone the pay raise. The speaker learned of it, and instead of my 1 year postponement of the pay raise, he upped me and outdid me by 2 years. So we were basically politically correct by saying we're not going to take a pay raise while people are getting sacked, the businesses are closing down. So here's the little minority who comes up and says, hey, let's postpone the pay raise. Because once it goes out publicly, people know that. As I said earlier, we don't have the votes, we've got the voice. When people know that somebody's in there saying, don't take the pay raise, and then the majority sees it and sees where the people are, then they proceed forward. So we took 2 years of a postponement of the pay raise. That's just one example. But speaking out is really the key. We don't have the votes, we have the voice. And people want to know that your representative is speaking for you and of you and through what are the right things to do. Commonsensical.
Yes. And what would you say are your top priorities in the legislature, and what are the top priorities of the Republican Party in general?
Well, I'm glad you asked that first. What are my top priorities? First, let me start with my district in Hawaii Kai. For those in Hawaii Kai or East Honolulu who are listening, we have got land use and land tenure problems. Land use in the sense that we just had a Luana Kai. We had basically a takeover of a giant building that was going to take over the Kalama Valley Shopping Center. A huge hullabaloo that rose, and fortunately the people who were going to develop that saw better and they picked up their stakes and pulled out. But the community was really riled up for a number of years, just like there was the cabins on Kaiwi, just like there was Save Sandy Beach, etc. my community is very land use cognizant, and if you don't inform them of what you're going to do, they're going to be very upset. We've got another one at Coco Kai that's now just taking form for more houses to be built in an area that's rather small. But as it mentioned, not only land use concerns, but land tenure. We have farmers in Hawaii Kai. Most people think, oh, Hawaii Kai, you guys are all middle class, blah, blah, blah. No, we have farmers. We've got like 80 acres of farms in the back. But right now, Kamehameha Schools is not talking to them about continuing their leases, which in a few months are going to expire. People have an affection for their products, affection for their farmers. And right now, that land lease issue is a big concern for the farmers. But some people who swim at the Oahu Club, their lease is coming up in a number of years also. In a few years, we lose the Oahu Club. Or also the lease from Kamehameha Schools for James. James is the Japanese-American Institute for Management Science. When that goes, what goes in that place, the beautiful place at Hawaii Kai Drive and Pepekeo, as well as Hahiodi Street? So land use issues, big concern in the district. Land use leases. And then I have to mention homelessness has been a perpetual concern by the community. Some of the theft, violence, and otherwise transient. Look, it's no different from any other places, just so people know that, look, Hawaii Kai's got its homeless problem just like everybody else. Now, in terms of what's going on in the Republican Party, we are rebuilding ourselves. We had a gain of 4 seats. We now have 5 out of 8 who are Hawaiian or part Hawaiian. And we're building the coalition, which in the beginning is when politics started in Hawaii. We had a Caucasian Haole coalition, Hawaiian Haole coalition. And we are now just rebuilding ourselves with some really crackerjack people like Diamond Garcia, who worked with me for 3 years and is just a rising star. In terms of the issues, I think we are probably the more common sense issues. Let's get this cost of living. Let's get housing. Some of my key issues regarding my office in this session have been housing, particularly for DHHL. And Emily, how that started was probably after being 10 years in the legislature, hearing the pablum that was given about the Hawaiian community. Basically, it's summarized in a way that says, look, if it's cultural, if it's protocol, if it's collective gathering and indigenous kind of things, hey, ika moai, Hawaiians. If it's political, economic, hey, we're not ready for you at the table yet. That, I mean, not because I lived in the village of the jungles of Borneo and I had an affinity for indigenous people, but it was not right what we were doing. So I set out and did a research project that ended up in writing a book called Broken Promises. I interviewed every former director of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, every former director who was alive, of course. And it came out to where it's a great act, but it's not being fulfilled by virtue of the money that it's been given and the political prioritization. Now, fortunately, after creating a documentary with Don O'Brien and others, we got, even with our trailer, 210,000 hits, which we put up on Facebook and Instagram, etc. That hopefully has got some fingerprints on what happened last session when $600 million was saying, okay, Hawaiians, we haven't been really too good to you over these last 100 years. And by the way, after 100 years, they've only got about 10,000 leases that have been given. 100 years, 10,000 leases, you know, it's like 100 a year. I mean, like Peter Sabia says, you know, you can do that in a number of months if you got the political will and the wherewithal to do it. So we've broken the promises to what now are 28,000 Hawaiians on the wait list. There's more people dying on the wait list than are actually getting on the thing. So that's one of my issues. I feel very strongly about the Hawaiian issues. The second issue I'm very concerned about are ALICE families. ALICE families are asset-limited income challenged employees, which means they're poor workers. Emily, I'm really embarrassed to say that half of our population is at the margin of poverty. Half of our population. I'm a representative, and we allow this to happen. It's like a guy with 8 kids. He can afford to feed 3. 2, he can give rations, but then the other ones have got to live off of government programs, which leads to my third issue. We have got to diversify our economy to get higher paying jobs and more jobs for these ALICE families. There's no reason why half of our population is without an income, with a roof over their head. That, to me, is a responsibility. First, the safety and the sustenance and the wherewithal for people. And we're not doing that. I feel very embarrassed to say that, but those are my three issues. Hawaiian issues, Alice issues, diversification of the economy. We talk about all these other things, but how much discussion did we have about diversification of the economy in the last sessions? Zero. We kind of maybe mentioned, yeah, we should, but nobody really puts down. I'd love to see Governor Green put together the best and the smartest and the brightest, say, coming up with a game plan and a business plan to diversify this economy. And we can do it. I mean, we limit ourselves and our expectations are low, but the way we're going now economically, we have a lot to be desired.
You know, let's go right into diversification of the economy.
Okay, you want to hear a couple?
Well, let me ask
Hollywood
you a few
of the
questions.
Pacific. The first one is a no-brainer. It's a low-hanging fruit. We should be the Hollywood of the Pacific. Right now, we have probably up to $600 to $800 million worth of business. Just to carry the we're in a studio. Just to carry the cameras, the guys are getting $80,000 a year. Duh. I mean, we need to go. But you know, the irony is, we are competing on a national level for these movies. Georgia and Kentucky are beating us out. I mean, okay, beautiful states maybe in the South, but we are the queen of the queens in terms of our environment, but we don't have the political environment to compete with them. We cap what they can get. So we should, number one, diversification of the economy, do the Hollywood of the Pacific. Secondly, we're right at the precipice of building a new stadium. We should be the sports center of the Pacific, the concert center of the Pacific. We can have rugby, we can have all these other concerts. They are money makers. But the way that it's going now, we kind of are nickel and diming. You know the difficulty with the stadium now? In some of my constituents who buy season tickets are saying, hey, I'm not going to go there and sit on a bench. And, you know, sitting on a bench is a pain in the backside and your back also. And right now, because of the money that's there, that's not enough to put seats, I think we're going to have a problem. Okay, so diversification of the economy with the whole movie issues, the whole sports issue. Thirdly, we have space tourism. The Big Island, where you send a plane up and then it takes a nosedive and you get 2 or 3 minutes of weightlessness. People will pay big money for that. We had a license to pursue it, and then it got bollocksed with different people changed and administrations changed. It went. So that's the third one. The fourth one, and dear to my heart because I'm a graduate of the East West Center, is the Geneva of the Pacific. We should be bringing Kim Jong-un and all these guys that get the South and the North Korean unity talks, which they have a ministry of unity. We should bring them here. We should have the Xi Jinpings and the Taiwanese sitting down at the East West Center. And we also have the Asia Pacific Security Studies Center in Waikiki, the Daniel Inouye creation. The point is, we have these advantages, but who's talking about them? I speak about this on the floor, people get a word of it, and then suddenly nothing happens because the money goes into the DOE or the money goes into other sort of areas. So diversification of the economy, key issue, Alice families, key issue, and Hawaiian issues, key issues. That's my platform. And as a conservative person with a backbone, those are the things I'm going to stick with.
Yes, and I wanted to go, so diversification of the economy. Right now, our economy, a lot of the money is coming from tourism. And we've seen firsthand from the pandemic of how much the tourism industry was just shuttered by that. You're bringing up all these, possible solutions. How do you turn away from that tourism first mindset? Because we have so many workers that work in the hotel industry, service industries that thrive off of all these tourists coming to Hawaii. How do you move away from that after so many years of doing that?
Emily, I think you have put your finger on an issue because that's the goose that lays the golden egg. You don't want to throw tourism out. You want to be able to work with it or within it, or work around it. In other words, we can't destroy what we already have in terms of our infrastructure, but in terms of working with it, bringing people here to do movies, bringing people here to do sports, bringing people here to do diplomacy. And I know under Governor Cayetano, we wanted to have medical tourism. Come here and get your gallbladder fixed or something, or heart or cardiology. The point is, we are an attraction to the world. We are one of the most beautiful places in the world. And we have a sister state with Bali. Bali is the other most beautiful place in the world. We need to use that as an incentive to attract people here, but then put them in other venues, as I said, for movies, for medical, for sports, and for diplomacy. So we can do it. But see, what's missing is the political will. As I said earlier, the Hawaiians got so much pablum on the state house floor. It was like, come on, guys, get serious about dealing with the Hawaiians. Well, let's get serious about dealing with the diversification of our economy and doing some of these things instead of saying, well, yeah, we're okay. We got military spending. We've got tourism spending. And quite frankly, tourism has been kicked to the curb by a lot of my colleagues. They say, oh, it's too many and too much. And they threw the director out. Maybe that's a bit of a crass way of saying that he retired or was fed up with what was going on. But he was doing managed tourism. He was doing a good job, Mr. DeFries. But they saw that he wasn't doing it fast enough. In other words, A, B, and B kind of infected the neighborhoods, saying, hey, too much noise, too many cars. Okay, well, let's ratchet that down. And the latest numbers that came out said that tourism did go down, but spending went up, and that was the goal. Less tourists, more money spent. That's still the goal, and I think the way they've got it now, CNHA, who's got the marketing tourism, I think they're going to do a great job. And we should talk about that also, because they had their Hawaiian convention in Las Vegas. They didn't have it in Honolulu. The numbers are there's more Hawaiians on the mainland than there are here. Why is that? Cost of living.
Yep.
Ian Tongi, hey, why aren't you here, Ian? Well, look, I got sold out of paradise, but I couldn't afford it. So we got to tackle that, just like the diversification of the economy, doing the cost of living. And let me say this, and I'm the co-chair of the Small Business Caucus, but this is not a plug just for the Small Business Caucus. The way that we've lowered the cost of living in Hawaii is not by what government has done, is by what the big box retailers have done. When the Costco's, the Targets, the Sam's Club, and the Walmarts, when they came, people were able to save money. Not because of what government did. You know, government taxes you when you buy your food. When you get your medical service, we're taxing you 4%. That is cruel and unusual punishment in terms of a taxation. Anyways, that was a little longer than maybe you wanted.
No, I mean, that's just one, the tipping point of, and that's the thing too. It's like tourism, Alice families that you mentioned, and housing. There are all these things that kind of coincide with each other, and cost of living. A big thing with tourism is that, sometimes we see tourists behaving badly, or, Hanauma Bay, for example. So many people...
My Hanauma Bay.
Yes, Hanauma Bay. So many people go out to Hanauma Bay, but there's these concerns of, if all these influx and visitors keep coming, can that natural beauty, natural resource that we have in Hawaii continue to last for years and years to come?
Interesting you mentioned Hanauma Bay, because that is a template and a model for other future destination sites and the malama of the environment, if you will, because right now you want to go to Hanauma Bay, you got to pay $25. I mean, if you're local and you got your own ID, it's free for you, but that has not cut down the number of visitors. I think they're at a few 100,000, it used to be like millions. Now it's, I think, 300,000. But they're getting 25 per visitor at Hanauma Bay, and it's working, and other people saying, how are you guys doing that? The Friends of Hanauma Bay, Lisa Bishop, doing a tremendous job of giving good counsel to what otherwise now Hanauma Bay, as I hate to use it, but it's almost a cash cow. It's actually making money, which there's a little bit of a controversy of who gets their hands on the money and how it's to be used, et cetera. But
yeah, I mean, actually that just, where does the money go toward for that? I mean, you brought up that
well,
point.
This may be cynical, but the giant sucking sound in anything in the city and county for the last 15 years has been the rail. And next month, we're going to be able to get a free ride on the rail, which is $10 billion and growing. And right now, that has been where, we used to have bulk pickup in our neighborhood. You got old pieces of junk, you can put them out front. Now you got to make an appointment, you got to label them, you can't have more than 3 pieces. That's because the money went into the rail. But I don't want to open that can of worms has been open long enough. But the point is, the city and county has kept, in a good way, taxes low, and they've made the rail as much unobtrusive as they can. But it's going to come up and bite us, because it's got $150 million per year operating expenses, of which has not been put into the budget, except they put it in the budget this year. And on top of that, and I know we're not going to get into the pay raise, but I'm telling you, on top of that, people are a little bit upset. Like, what are you guys doing? times are still tough. The rail is coming and it's got a deficit. The cash box doesn't pay. And you guys want to give yourself a raise of 64%? Who gets a 64% raise?
Yeah.
The guys on strike the other day, who was on strike? The ones that were at the gas company. What percent did they get, Emily? What was their raise increase? 14%.
Wow.
Anyway, the sucking sound for the rail is still hissing through the state of Hawaii, and I think until 2030 we've added a 5%, 4.5% GD tax, where it's 4%. Normally, we've added the 0.5% until 2030. The question is, will we continue to do that to subsidize the rail, or will the state pull back and say, hey, CD County, this is your baby, run with it?
Yeah, I mean, we went through a whole list of conversations in just that. But bringing it back to like your main topics, I want to go to Alice families.
Yes.
Instead of using that acronym, can you explain to our viewers who these people are in our community? You said that about 50% of Hawaii's population.
48%, I think, is the latest. Some say even 53%, but they're basically the working poor. When you said about the Waikiki, some of those are the ones that are working in the hotels. Some of those people are working in the restaurants. Those are the people who have, and this is not an exaggeration, 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet. So the working poor means they're really working hard and they're getting lower wages with a lot of hours. And those are the things that, with the structure of our economy, that unless they go back for retraining or get a level of degrees where they up their availability. And by the way, right now, there's so many jobs that are available. The city, well, I know at least the state of Hawaii, every one of the executive departments is missing 20 to 25% of their workforce. The vacancies are galore. So anybody who's listening, I thought we were like in a radio. Is anybody who's watching who needs a job, your state is looking for, in all of its department, not just some of them, 25% vacancies in all of them. So whatever you wanted to be in terms of state government, it's there available. Just contact the HR people. That's a bit of a plug for. In fact, some people ask, where have all the workers gone? I mean, a few years ago, everybody was full employment. It was down to unemployment 2.2%. Where did those people go? Some have said, well, 15,000 of them went back to the mainland last year, Emily. Before that, 14,000 people went back to the mainland. So we've got a bit of a migratory issue where we're having too many have-nots, and if it's at 48% and growing, the Alice families is not a good sign that we're doing our job as the legislators for the people of Hawaii.
And what is being done to help those families or the workers that fall under that category?
We're doing a lot of subsidy things, Well, I mean, there's a lot of incentives to get them childcare, to do rent subsidies, which kind of like keeps you afloat, but it doesn't get you out of that cycle of not getting anywhere. It's kind of like when if you break your leg, Emily, we're going to give you a cast. Generally, bones heal in about 6 weeks. But the way that we make you dependent, we're going to make you wear it for 6 months or maybe even 6 years. There's some people in public housing who've been there for generations. That is not the best way to develop the potential of the people in your particular society. That's kind of making them dependent upon you. And the more I see of government, the more we're making people dependent upon us. We are feeding now 2 meals a day for all the all the school system. I mean, before your mother and your father or somebody would feed you before you went to school. Now it's the government that's feeding you, not only once a day, but twice a day. And as further proof of the Alice families, 58% of the families qualify for the lunch subsidy because they don't have enough income. 58%. That is huge. That's the majority of our people can't afford to send their kids to school with lunch money. That is wrong. That is not the way to run a society and to be a helpful agent for your people. I take responsibility for that.
Yeah. And, you mentioned that dependency. How do you stop that dependency on the government?
Well, you've got to give people opportunities. And that's what the great thing about America. We are equal opportunity, equal justice under the law, and equal opportunity for everybody. Everybody should have an opportunity to make the most of themselves, I'd love to see a coalition with Kamehameha Schools and the state of Hawaii to bring up the Hawaiian community to parity with all the other communities. Every group that's come to Hawaii has got a seat at the table. And that's one of the reasons why I say when I meet young Hawaiians who are promising, run for office, get a seat at the table, change things around. Because right now, they're still on the periphery making their views known, but they're not at the decision-making table where their votes will be known and it'll make a difference. So it's going to take some political will to change things. Otherwise, business as usual. There's a lot of people very satisfied with where they are, what they have. Why do we want to change things? Why for the last 30 years have we not had a constitutional convention? The Constitution of Hawaii says you will every 10 years have a constitutional convention. Yeah, we want to tweak a little bit of the laws, etc. Like in 1978, when my good friend Governor Waihee said, hey, we should give the Hawaiians preeminence and create the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Revolutionary. But now, since then, maybe it's more than 30. No, the point is we have not had a constitutional convention because people who are in the know politically are self-satisfied. Hey, we don't want any changes. Let's keep things locked in. If we're labor, we don't want any labor changes. If it's different rights, sexuality, etc., we don't want any changes, etc. So change has to come from the politicians, and the politicians need to be those who step up with change in mind and not necessarily, as many of the new members of this legislature are so progressive and socialist-minded, pretty soon the government will be running everything.
Representative Ward, I want to go to the Native Hawaiian issues. You know, you're a member of the legislature's Department of Hawaiian Homelands working group whose role is to oversee the spending of the $600 million that was appropriated to DHHL by the legislature in 2022. That's a lot of money. And, you know, some would say that's a short period of time to use it or lose it. How is the legislature making sure the money is spent and goes to the right people?
Very good question. Two things. One is it's not a lot of money. After 100 years and on the short shift of building only a few hundred houses per year, it should be every year that we give them $600 million. Now, I know that's fiscally impossible, but it's not there. In terms of what was your question about? What it's a lot of money, and then how do we watch over them? Like, hey, I'm on this great watchdog committee that's going to be looking over them. Guess how many times we've met? We've been in existence for like 3 to 4 months. Guess how many times we met?
A few.
Once.
Okay.
And why is that? Well, you got to ask Speaker Say, and you got to ask the chair of that committee. From Maui. I mean, it's like I'm not sure we're doing our job as a committee, or unless, as in many cases, the chairs are the ones that are doing it, and then they just let it sprinkle down. Which, can I mention my pet peeve of what's going on in the legislature and why sometimes we are suspected as being corrupt? When I came into in the 90s, there was no voting. In a committee, you never voted. It was the chair who said, this passes, this fails. After Leslie Hara and other suffragettes came through, we had voting. But guess what? The voting to this day does not allow. If a bill is to be deferred or killed, there's no voting. It's the chair. The chair defers the bill. No vote. And there's a particular gentleman in prison who I quote often, and he said, famously, I can kill a bill anytime I want. And that's why he's in jail, because he did it for money and for corruption. So for people who are listening, please know that we don't have suffrage yet in our committees in the legislature. It's still chair-centric. It's not democratic, open decision-making or transparent, because a lot of you know who've tried to participate and get on the inside of it. We have been less than open and transparent.
So with that $600 million, some say you could build up to 3,000 homes. What is the process of making this a reality? What is the process of, finally getting those Native Hawaiians off the wait list?
Okay, the first thing is to think entrepreneurial, think innovatively. Think about trading land for other income streams, doing joint ventures. In my quote handbook called Broken Promises, when we have the thinking that this is an important issue, we get things done. That's why the 600 million came. The political will has always been lacking, or let's say has left a lot to be desired. So the money should be there because they should be innovative, having generated income like OHA's doing with their shopping center in Kapolei. They're doing income. The vision of Prince Kohil, and some people know this, some people are surprised when they hear it, was an independent, self-sufficient Hawaiian community. Look, the Hawaiians had lost their land. This was a way that Prince Kohil said, well, look, you're going to get back on the land. By the way, he didn't want any blood quantum whatsoever. He said, if you're Hawaiian, you're Hawaiian. You don't give me all this blood quantum stuff. The compromise was you got to be 50%. Eventually now, we're going to run out of 50% because there's such intermarriage in the Hawaiian community. And the land, of which there's 203,000 acres, there's probably 150,000 acres not even being utilized. What's going to happen to that land? The point is we got to have the political will to get that land out to the people, get the housing, and creatively entrepreneurial. You ask, what should we do? We should be creative and innovative and entrepreneurial. Give the money, do the mortgages, leverage. There's so many HUD programs. There's so many programs for no down payment fees. The thing is, and I go back to the political will, it should be done. You set your target and you do it. And we have an obligation to the Hawaiian people, not just for protocol and cultural things, but for actual political, economic things. And that's where it's very sad. And that's why I'm not going to give up talking about those issues. And by the way, just so other people don't know this, I said our place is the marketplace of ideas. We had a bill that said, if you are in Kakako Makai, i.e. where OHA owns the land, which was given to them as compensation for $200 million, we can tell you where you can locate your building. Emily, I swear to God, as sure as I'm looking at you, I gave my speech saying you're cheating the Hawaiians, and I got ruled out of order, and for the first time ever in the history of my 20-some years at the legislature, my whole speech, not a word was cut out, the whole speech was cut out. That's what's happening when we get to the Hawaiian issues, when it becomes really political and when it becomes really economic. It's like, hey, shut up, don't make noise. They were going to tell the Hawaiians what they could do with their land. And I said, no, that's not right. The whole speech, I've never had I've had disingenuous or that was not fair. I've had words cut. I used the word cancel culture once. Had to get that cut out of my speech. So just that you know, and some of the people listening, we've got suffrage, but it's kind of a controlled way. This is a little bit inside baseball. That's why I appreciate you having me here and giving me kind of a free wheel on what not is a radio show, but actually people are looking at us.
Yeah, totally. And, we discussed so many things in this, talk that we've had. And finally, the past legislative session has ended, but, the work is still ongoing. What are you working on now?
I think I want to work on advancing the Hawaiian issues, the Alice issues, and those particularly diversification of the economy. We've got to get the best and the brightest around the table to come up with a game plan that we can do better. And when you've got the data that says half of your population can't afford rent and food to feed his family, my God, that you want more of an economic imperative than that. So it's more of the same, staying the course, getting the Alice families, getting the economy diversified, and getting the Hawaiians into housing. My God, it's about time.
Yes, well, thank you so much for joining us today, Representative. I really appreciate this whole conversation. We've covered so much, but didn't you mention that you wanted to plug in some...
my beer summit. My beer summit is no alcoholic beverages needed, but we meet at the Coca Marina Shopping Center. We meet at the Greek Marina. We just had Augie Tulba speak, and we're going to have Chad Blair, who's the editor of Civil Beat, speak in our next one, which is always the first Thursday of the month. First Thursday of the month, so you don't have to remember whatever, but it's at 6 o'clock, and people come and listen, they ask questions, and it's because 96825 has the highest education per capita. I'm not bragging, but it's where they ask really hard questions. They put my feet to the fire, make me answer questions, and when we have a beer summit, which, by the way, came out of President Obama, the only time I borrowed something from Obama was he and Joe the plumber were having a public discourse. He said, Joe, come on over to the Rose Garden. We'll talk about this in more detail. I don't know if they had a beer or not. We don't have beer, but we call it the Beer Summit because of what Obama did. And it's welcome to everybody. You don't have to live in East Honolulu. But if you want to talk to Chad Blair, we've had Shopo come. We've had former governors. We've had former mayors. Mayor Blangiardi's been too busy. Your former general manager. He's been too busy to make it. But we enjoy listening to leaders and listening to what the people's questions are. So thank you for allowing me to have that Beer Summit plug.
Yes, of course. Well, thank you so much again.
Aloha.
You can watch and listen to more of the Debrief at hawaiinewsnow.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Hope you tune in next week. This is your host, Emily Cristobal, and mahalo for listening.